Saturday, February 22, 1902. The New York Times. Varnish works ablaze. Dangerous and spectacular fire in Long Island City. Smoke shrouds the town. Explosion follows explosion, and flames threaten big benzene tank. Chief Croker summons overwhelming force. One of the most spectacular fires the city has seen in years destroyed the varnish works of Emil Kalman and Company in Long Island City yesterday. For a time, the flames threatened to sweep through a large section, and but for the fact that Chief Croker mustered 4 fireboats, all the engines in Long Island City, and many from Brooklyn, the fire might have spread disastrously. From the fire rose a volume of black smoke, which was not carried away, but hung about 20 feet from the ground. So dense was this smoke that except for the light from the fire, it was impossible to see. Houses and stores in the vicinity had to light gas and electric lights in order to see. Through the pall of smoke, the big flakes of snow fell, and as they emerged were tinged with black. The flames started in the middle of the works shortly after 11 o'clock. It is said that a pot of varnish boiled over, setting fire to everything about. The men in the works fled immediately. The men on the second floor had narrow escapes, but all got out. One young man named Dugan, an apprentice, became panic-stricken and leapt from a window. He was not seriously hurt owing to his landing in a heap of snow. The Kalman Works had a frontage of 100 feet on West Avenue and 200 on 4th Street. On the west of them stand the Pratt and Lambert Works, and on the other side are the big varnish works of John Smith and Company. About these are a number of frame tenement houses, and close by are the frame stables of the Long Island Express Company. The first alarm was followed immediately by a second, and then alarm after alarm was sent in, calling engines from all parts of the districts and from Brooklyn. The officials at headquarters were informed of the dangerous character of the fire, and within a short time Chief Croker was on the scene, crossing by the 34th Street ferry, one of the boats of which made a special trip for him. Fire Commissioner Sturgis, Chief Surgeon Smith, and Deputy Commissioner Epstein of the Police Department reached the scene soon after Chief Croker. The chief immediately sent in 4 special calls, which moved engines as far down as Brooklyn Bridge and brought the fireboats Booty, Van Wyck, New Yorker, and Havemeyer. The water pressure was so poor that the engines were continually sucking the mains dry, and the chief reliance had to be placed on the fireboats. Chief Croker denounced the failure of water supply and sent word to the various pumping stations that there must be a better pressure. All the big factories throughout Long Island City had to draw their fires as the water pressure ran so low that the boilers were not supplied. Close to the flames and high in the air in the Smith Works towered a big tank, which Chief Croker was told was filled with benzene. Chief Surgeon Smith at once sent calls for ambulances and doctors. This was a precautionary measure, it seeming almost impossible that the big tank would not explode. Dr. Brennan of St. John's Hospital, with 2 ambulances and 4 doctors and an ambulance and 2 doctors from the Eastern District Hospital, responded and were held in reserve. Chief Croker concentrated the entire power of the Booty on the dangerous tank, and it was drenched with a continual deluge of water. The heat, however, was so great about the tank that despite the steady streams poured on it, the water rose in clouds of steam from the sides. Inside the Kalman Works, there was explosion after explosion, which threw the flames high into the air in great waves. It was useless to try to save the Kalman Works, and the firemen exerted all their efforts to keeping the flames confined to them. On the Pratt and Lambert Works, a big force was concentrated. The wind, what there was of it, was carrying the flames against these works, and a 28-inch brick wall was the point where the firemen made their stand. The wall had been erected for the purpose which it served yesterday. Unmindful of the heavily falling snow, a great crowd assembled about the fire. Hundreds crossed the East River from Manhattan to obtain a view of the spectacle. The police reserves from 4 Queens and several Brooklyn precincts were quickly massed about the fire under orders from Deputy Commissioner Epstein, and even then had difficulty in keeping the lines fixed at the distance ordered by Chief Croker. Firemen were stationed also for 1,000 yards in every direction. When the fire was at its height, 4 firemen were overcome. They were Captain Keeney of Truck 54 and Privates Gallagher, Reardon, and Brady of his company. They had taken a line of hose into a driveway between the Kelman and Smith works when a backdraft drove the smoke and the poisonous fumes in on them, and they collapsed. Chief Croker and a dozen men were also in the alley at the time, but close to its mouth. They plunged in after the 4 men at the rear and dragged them out. Surgeon Smith revived them, and they returned to duty. Chief Croker, just after reaching the fire, and while in the act of pulling on his boots, had an experience. A private was standing close to him, tending a line of hose, and the chief gave him an order. The man, not knowing him, replied, "I'll be damned if I do. I just got a roasting for leaving post, and—" He did not finish, as he turned about as he spoke, and saw the absence of a battalion number on the chief's helmet, and he vanished, obeying quickly the order that had been given. The loss on the Kelman works was last night estimated at $225,000, mostly on stock and machinery. Mr. Kelman said he could make no statement relative to the insurance, as the papers were in his Manhattan office and he had not had a chance to ascertain just what the amount carried was, but thought it was in the neighborhood of $150,000. The rates on buildings devoted to varnish making were necessarily high, he said. During the fire, the police ordered the tenants from the houses for blocks around, and women and children spent the afternoon in saloons and elsewhere where they could find shelter. Most of the furniture was removed from the houses and piled in the streets to the windward of the fire, and the heaps were quickly covered by snow. Later, the furniture and bedding became saturated with the rain. After the firemen pronounced the danger past and the tenants were allowed to return to their homes, their situation was pitiful. They had to search through the streets for their particular piles of goods, and when these were located, the goods were so wet as to be useless for the night. The firemen were loud in their denunciation of the condition of the water supply. The largest main in the section is said to be 6 inches, and most of them are but 4 inches. With 8 engines at work on the mains, some of the engines sucked nothing but air, and the rest missed strokes and raced, throwing only feeble streams of water. But for the proximity of the East River and Newtown Creek, the firemen would have been completely crippled. Pending the arrival of the fireboats, most of the engines had to be shifted to the waterfronts to obtain a supply.